So at that time we said, well, what shall we do? What's next best? We had met somebody who knew Lebanon. Said, well, next best, it's Lebanon. You've got to go Beirut. That is the dream. And so you have everything. You have the best of the West and you have the best of the Orient. And of course, this was true. You know, we're talking 62. I'm an Austrian. I'm from Vienna, and I was 150% Viennese. Never thought of leaving that place ever until a disaster struck, and I got a Fulbright scholarship to go to the States to study. I've been studying architecture in Vienna, and well, that was a chance to get away from, it was in 55, you know, times were still bad after the war, and to go to the States at that time, it was a tremendous gift and opportunity. So I studied there with Mies van der Rohe, famous architect, and instead of going back after 1 year as foreseen, I could stay on for practical training, and I was working with an excellent firm in Chicago. Well, and then I had to come back, and I finished my degree in Vienna. And then I thought, well, what shall I do? That was, as I said, in the 50s, and the only place where I could apply my knowledge there, you know, modern architecture and modern technology, was in Switzerland at the time, which could afford this kind of novelty. So I had married then at the time when on my return, and we moved to Switzerland. And in Switzerland it was all fine, and I had a good job, but after 3 years or so, more, it was 3.5 years in Switzerland, my wife and I said, well, it's a bit too narrow, you know, to settle in Switzerland. We actually don't want, we still want to have some, see something of the world, you know. So at that time we said, well, what shall we do? What's next best? And next best, we had met somebody who knew Lebanon. Said, well, next best, it's Lebanon. You've got to go Beirut. So I made contacts there, and I was ready to go as an architect. In fact, I had a proposal to work for on a hospital job with Dar al-Handasa, but then these people, Dar al-Handasa, they told me, look, with your background, maybe the American university is interested in your services. So I said, well, why not? And I wrote there also. And sure enough, I got a cable from then Dean Widener, say, well, why he comes to Austria, he comes to Innsbruck, if we could meet there. He would like to meet me. So, okay, that happened, and the result was that he said, well, you'll be hearing of us. You know. And the next thing I knew was that I was invited to AOV to come for an interview with Dean Rossen at the time, who was running for, you know, architecture. At that time it was architectural engineering. And, well, it all worked out to I liked the place, he liked me. So, all right, we're gonna go to Lebanon.
who is the other architects in Lebanon who work on the same project about the typology
There
of
was
the Lebanese houses?
Monsieur Liger-Belair, who actually had already written about it before I did, and he already had established certain these basic types of houses, which are universal in, and but of course I had the advantage of having this course and the students attend, so I could really go out and collect examples, really measured exactly. And when I had enough of them, I said, "No, okay, now I can put up a study on this." And one discovered that the world had become everywhere the same, You couldn't tell, is this building in Japan or is it in London or whatever. In the 60s then, it started to become the awareness that we have to go back also to the traditions, and we have to respect them, and we cannot just concrete everything. And that started the regional architecture. That regionalism is needed, so we again have a link to our past, and one can identify with a place. And this was the moment when I had come to Lebanon, and the dean, Raymond Gossen at the time, he said, well, we need to have now a course in regional architecture. It's done everywhere. And we have to find out ourselves what is our regional architecture. He said, oh, you are going to do this, so this way, and you have open eyes, you don't know anything really yet about Lebanon, and it's very true. When you're not familiar with the place, you see things come fresh. And so he put me on that course, and it was then a summer course, field work, most of it field work. That means with the students going out and looking, well, what is there, and recording, which was not just taking photographs, but drawing, measuring up the buildings. And this we did for, as I said, 6 or 7 summers. We did this, and I had then arrived at a real good collection of examples, and we had come to conclusions. There's a very strong local tradition of building, and such and such and such types of houses, and central hall house with the famous 3 arches and the pyramidal red tile roof was clearly established as the Lebanese house, which you couldn't find anywhere else really. But what happened also was that at that time Dean Grossen said, look, if you want to stay in academics, you've got to get a degree, you've got to get a PhD, these days.
Now I need some details, especially that you got a witness on the preparation of your book. And what your first assistant, she had to participate in this book.
Yeah. First we had to collect the material, the evidence. And that was done by the summer course with the students of AUB, architecture students of AUB. And for this purpose we had to go out, do the field work, and that we did this in every summer with our students. And in '74 finally we had enough material, so it's actually longer than what I said, 10 years, to come up with a book, which at that time coincided beautifully with my need to get a PhD, because I stayed in academic work, and so I worked on this then in German. I collected all this material, and I organized it and worked the text in German. And my dear wife, she had to type this, you see. And in order to get, we are talking in the early 60s, in order to get the PhD, you had to submit 6 copies of that book, 6 copies. And the only way, there were no photocopiers at that time, the only way there was really to type it on this matrix, on the typewriter, and then there were these rotating machines where you could make copies, and then you had to bind it, and when it came to all the photographs, you had to make millions of little black and white photos and stick them into the book, and all this. She was helping me in this grade. It was really, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work.
What do you recall, Madame, of this period?
This period was pretty difficult because he was for a long time in Vienna, and I was alone with the children in Beirut. And at that time, the student strikes broke out. And we were trapped in AUB because of the student strikes, and they were blowing with loudspeakers on the faculty buildings, "We are the champions." I will never forget this song. And so I was there alone, and then when he came back, he had all this material. And he said, "Well, I need you to type this." And we had, of course, an old typewriter, which is still here, staying around somewhere.
Olivetti it was.
And Olivetti, yeah, exactly. So I was sitting there while the kids were in school, and I was sitting there typing away his thesis. And whenever I made a mistake, I had to take some
nail
polish to
cover it up.
To cover it up. Those were the old times, the old way, how things were done, yeah. So that was teamwork, let's say.
Did you have the chance to go together to visit the Lebanese villages?
Oh yeah, we went.
What do you
together.
recall about this golden age, golden period?
Oh, this was Lebanon. Lebanon was absolutely, yeah, it was a golden period. It was a dream country. We knew so many places. Many Lebanese did not know, so we could show them the places. We were going all over the place. We had our secret and our most liked spots where we would go ever and ever again with the kids and do our hiking and in the meantime just visit all these villages which we really loved a lot.
It seems that after that you made several books. I can recall 3 of them. One for the Arab world and the second for Baalbek. And there is this so interesting the conference that you made over on Beirut. Can you talk about these 3 projects, please?
Okay. Well, let's first go to Baalbek. Baalbek interested me very much. I had done several, I don't have copies of it here, I had done programs for the Baalbek festival with themes on the different temples. The French, who took over after the Ottomans, kind of hid everything what the Germans were doing. This was after the war and all this. And they of course, they did some additional excavations and that all was done. But otherwise, this was, nobody knew. And also the Germans who had done the big excavations and the big reconstruction on paper of Baalbek and the scientific evaluation and all this fantastic work, which was all done after on material gathered before the war, but published after the First World War. And who would ever, at that time in the 20s, nobody knew about it. And the French, of course, didn't make much ado about it. And I discovered this then. I knew that the Germans were involved, but I discovered volumes of this, which are very valuable, huge volumes, tucked away in a reserve at the AUB library, you know. So they have it there, and also the French and the Archaeological Institute of the French, they also have it. But you don't find it, of course, anywhere. So I discovered it then at AUB, and since I was at AUB professor, I could pull it out. And that was then with David Colm, a friend of mine, said, this we have to bring to the public, you know. And on the basis of this material, we were doing several Baalbek programs.
At what time you left Lebanon for good to go to the Gulf to make this big volume of your Arabic architecture of the Arab world?
Yeah. Here's Lebanon. This book is it's organized by countries, by Arab countries. So here you have Lebanon, the Lebanese stuff, which of course is also in my Lebanese book. And you have Syria, palaces of Syria, and Egypt you have. This book takes the whole Arab region, you know, so Maghreb and Mashriq, and it shows the similarity in climate and the general situation. So to explain what are the common elements of this. And this, as I said, was finally realized. So you have Yemen in there, all these Arab countries, from the Gulf to the Atlantic are represented here, with the description of similarities and specialties.
So there is one conference book you made. It's on Beirut.
Yeah.
I believe in 1983.
It was after the Israeli invasion, when there was then the great hope and sustained that now the bad times are over, and we can go and really look what have we got as far as the structure is concerned, and what can we draw out of this improvements for the city. And this finally generated a conference, an international conference in 1983 under the heading of Beirut of Tomorrow. And there a number of more international architects and town planners came under the auspices of then Minister of Public Works Mr. Khoury, who was of course part of it, and that was a very fruitful gathering, because it really set certain principles, of which later Solidaire then actually was able to realize most of those principles. So it was something well planned, and that's very rare in Lebanon. And also, of course, that Solidaire was able to bring the properties of so many individuals under one hat, which only was possible under the difficulties of the times.
The new generations, they don't draw just like you used to do in the past.
They don't need to draw the way we used to draw, because now we're having computers and computer graphics, and they do a much better job and faster than we could ever have done. But at my time, of course, if you look here, I was studying in 1949 architecture. There was no such things. And this was then, of course, still the Beaux-Arts tradition we were introduced, and that involved painstaking drawing with these ruling pens where you had to put drops of ink in there, and then you had to give it a wash, you know, and with all the effect of shadows and counter shadows and reflections. Now, this was at that time a necessity, but it was also a screening of people. If you could not endure this, and it was very tough, you were not fit for architecture, like anatomy for the medicine student, you know, who couldn't take the blood and all that. He was not fit for a medic. And so I everywhere, of course, took a great pleasure in making aquarelles on the spot, because also this is something you have drawn, something you have painted, you don't forget. It's a wonderful memory also. And so I arrived here, and I happened to have here several of these Lebanese, talk of our Lebanese. After all, I spent 25 years. And so here you have Mukhtar, and you have a view along the coast here, and of course you have the cedars. You see that in back in winter. That was actually very nice, and explored the whole country, not just for the architecture, but of course for the natural sites. And there was one of the principal ones is the Grufer, the Bala, the Grufer Bala, which every Lebanese needs to see in the spring when there is water falling down here.
In '86, actually, when the war was still going on and we kind of had enough of it, we said, well, he can go on a sabbatical. So we were looking around all over the place and trying to find a place where we could go. And finally, Kenya materialized, which was our, it was our dream to go to an African country, and it was a very bad pay, but still we made it, we wanted to do it. Okay, so we were in Kenya from '87 till '90. And one of the cutest incidents was happening when we were coming out of the Alliance Française, where there was the 200 years French Revolution films going on in the Alliance Française. And we were coming out, and a young guy comes up to Fritz and he says, "Oh, bonjour, Monsieur Professor Ragette, do you still know me?" And Fritz looked at him like this and said, "Which year?"
How can you describe this Lebanon, compare it to the golden one that you both know it?
Well, out in the mountains, you know, in those villages, nothing much had changed. See, architecture-wise, of course. I mean, I said a long time ago that this is a lost cause. You know, it's a lost cause. Yeah, because it's again the power of money. You know, and there's no if you can build a high-rise building, you know, by tearing down this house there and make so much money. That's it. That's the end of that house. I regret a lot about Junior, you know, that it been so overbuilt. Although some along the coast is somehow miraculously preserved, a line of houses. You see.
But at that time, it was absolutely a dream country for us.
The cedars of Lebanon are still there, strong and permanent. And that's the way this country wants to be. I think they'll make it.